Part VI, Chapter 3 of Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Translated by Constance Garnett. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine. Part VI, Chapter 3. He hurried to Svidrigaïlov's. What he had to hope from that man he did not know, but that man had some hidden power over him. Having once recognized this, he could not rest, and now the time had come. On the way, one question particularly worried him. Had Svidrigaïlov been to Porfiry's? As far as he could judge, he would swear to it, that he had not. He pondered again and again, went over Porfiry's visit. No, he hadn't been, of course he hadn't. But if he had not been yet, would he go? Meanwhile, for the present, he fancied he couldn't. Why? He could not have explained, but if he could, he would not have wasted much thought over it at the moment. It all worried him, and at the same time he could not attend to it. Strange to say, none would have believed it perhaps, but he only felt a faint, vague anxiety about his immediate future. Another much more important anxiety tormented him. It concerned himself, but in a different, more vital way. Moreover, he was conscious of immense moral fatigue, though his mind was working better that morning than it had done of late. And was it worth while, after all that had happened, to contend with these new trivial difficulties? Was it worth while, for instance, to manoeuvre that Svidrigaïlov should not go to Porfiry's? Was it worth while to investigate, to ascertain the facts, to waste time over anyone like Svidrigaïlov? Oh, how sick he was of it all! And yet he was hastening to Svidrigaïlov. Could he be expecting something new from him, information or means of escape? Men will catch at straws. Was it destiny or some instinct bringing them together? Perhaps it was only fatigue, despair, perhaps it was not Svidrigaïlov but some other whom he needed, and Svidrigaïlov had simply presented himself by chance. Sonia? But what should he go to Sonia for now? To beg her tears again? He was afraid of Sonia, too. Sonia stood before him as an irrevocable sentence. He must go his own way or hers. At that moment especially he did not feel equal to seeing her. No, would it not be better to try Svidrigaïlov? And he could not help inwardly owning that he had long felt that he must see him for some reason. But what could they have in common? Their very evil doing could not be of the same kind. The man, moreover, was very unpleasant, evidently depraved, undoubtedly cunning and deceitful, possibly malignant. Such stories were told about him. It is true he was befriending Katerina Ivanovna's children, but who could tell with what motive and what it meant? The man always had some design, some project. There was another thought which had been continually hovering of late about Raskolnikov's mind and causing him great uneasiness. It was so painful that he made distinct efforts to get rid of it. He sometimes thought that Svidrigaïlov was dogging his footsteps. Svidrigaïlov had found out his secret and had had designs on Dounia. What if he had them still? Wasn't it practically certain that he had? And what if, having learnt his secret and so having gained power over him, he were to use it as a weapon against Dounia? This idea sometimes even tormented his dreams, but it had never presented itself so vividly to him as on his way to Svidrigaïlov. The very thought moved him to gloomy rage. To begin with, this would transform everything, even his own position. He would have at once to confess his secret to Dounia. Would he have to give himself up perhaps to prevent Dounia from taking some rash step? The letter? This morning Dounia had received a letter. From whom could she get letters in Petersburg? Luzhin, perhaps? It's true Razumihin was there to protect her, but Razumihin knew nothing of the position. Perhaps it was his duty to tell Razumihin. He thought of it with repugnance. In any case he must see Svidrigaïlov as soon as possible, he decided finally. Thank God, the details of the interview were of little consequence, if only he could get at the root of the matter. But if Svidrigaïlov were capable, if he were intriguing against Dounia, then... Raskolnikov was so exhausted by what he had passed through that month that he could only decide such questions in one way. "Then I shall kill him," he thought in cold despair. A sudden anguish oppressed his heart. He stood still in the middle of the street and began looking about to see where he was and which way he was going. He found himself in X Prospect, 30 or 40 paces from the Hay Market through which he had come. The whole second storey of the house on the left was used as a tavern. All the windows were wide open; judging from the figures moving at the windows, the rooms were full to overflowing. There were sounds of singing, of clarionet and violin, and the boom of a Turkish drum. He could hear women shrieking. He was about to turn back, wondering why he had come to the X. Prospect, when suddenly at one of the end windows he saw Svidrigaïlov, sitting at a tea table right in the open window, with a pipe in his mouth. Raskolnikov was dreadfully taken aback, almost terrified. Svidrigaïlov was silently watching and scrutinising him and, what struck Raskolnikov at once, seemed to be meaning to get up and slip away unobserved. Raskolnikov at once pretended not to have seen him, but to be looking absent-mindedly away, while he watched him out of the corner of his eye. His heart was beating violently. Yet it was evident that Svidrigaïlov did not want to be seen. He took the pipe out of his mouth and was on the point of concealing himself, but as he got up and moved back his chair, he seemed to have become suddenly aware that Raskolnikov had seen him and was watching him. What had passed between them was much the same as what happened at their first meeting in Raskolnikov's room. A sly smile came into Svidrigaïlov's face and grew broader and broader. Each knew that he was seen and watched by the other. At last Svidrigaïlov broke into a loud laugh. "Well, well, come in if you want me, I am here," he shouted from the window. Raskolnikov went up into the tavern. He found Svidrigaïlov in a tiny back room, adjoining the saloon in which merchants, clerks and numbers of people of all sorts were drinking tea at 20 little tables to the desperate bawling of a chorus of singers. The click of billiard balls could be heard in the distance. On the table before Svidrigaïlov stood an open bottle and a glass half full of champagne. In the room he found also a boy with a little hand organ, a healthy-looking red-cheeked girl of 18, wearing a tucked-up striped shirt and a Tyrolese hat with ribbons. In spite of the chorus in the other room, she was singing some servants' hall song in a rather husky contralto, to the accompaniment of the organ. "Come, that's enough!" Svidrigaïlov stopped her at Raskolnikov's entrance. The girl at once broke off and stood waiting respectfully. She had sung her guttural rhymes too, with a serious and respectful expression in her face. "Hey, Philip, a glass!" shouted Svidrigaïlov. "I won't drink anything," said Raskolnikov. "As you like. I didn't mean it for you. Drink, Katya, I don't want anything more to day, you can go." He poured her out a full glass and laid down a yellow note. Katya drank off her glass of wine as women do without putting it down, in 20 gulps, took the note and kissed Svidrigaïlov's hand, which he allowed quite seriously. She went out of the room and the boy trailed after her with the organ. Both had been brought in from the street. Svidrigaïlov had not been a week in Petersburg, but everything about him was already, so to speak, on a patriarchal footing. The waiter, Philip, was by now an old friend and very obsequious. The door leading to the saloon had a lock on it. Svidrigaïlov was at home in this room and perhaps spent whole days in it. The tavern was dirty and wretched, not even second rate. "I was going to see you and looking for you," Raskolnikov began, "but I don't know what made me turn from the Hay Market into the X. Prospect just now. I never take this turning. I turned to the right from the Hay Market. And this isn't the way to you. I simply turned and here you are. It is strange." "Why don't you say at once it's a miracle?" "Because it may be only chance." "Oh, that's the way with all you folk," laughed Svidrigaïlov. "You won't admit it, even if you do inward believe it a miracle. Here you say that it may be only chance. And what cowards they all are here, about having an opinion of their own. You can't fancy, Rodion Romanovitch. I don't mean you, you have an opinion of your own and are not afraid to have it. That's how it was you attracted my curiosity." "Nothing else?" "Well, that's enough, you know." Svidrigaïlov was obviously exhilarated, but only slightly so. He had not had more than half a glass of wine. "I fancy you came to see me before you knew that I was capable of having what you call an opinion of my own," observed Raskolnikov. "Oh, well, it was a different matter. Everyone has his own plans. And apropos of the miracle, let me tell you that I think you have been asleep for the last 2 or 3 days. I told you of this tavern myself. There is no miracle in your coming straight here. I explained the way myself, told you where it was, and the hours you could find me here. Do you remember?" "I don't remember," answered Raskolnikov with surprise. "I believe you. I told you twice. The address has been stamped mechanically on your memory. You turned this way mechanically, and yet precisely according to the direction, though you were not aware of it. When I told you then, I hardly hoped you understood me. You give yourself away too much, Rodion Romanovitch. And another thing, I'm convinced there are lots of people in Petersburg who talk to themselves as they walk. This is a town of crazy people. If only we had scientific men, doctors, lawyers and philosophers might make most valuable investigations in Petersburg, each in his own line. There are few places where there are so many gloomy, strong and queer influences on the soul of man as in Petersburg. The mere influences of climate mean so much. And it's the administrative centre of all Russia, and its character must be reflected on the whole country. But that is neither here nor there now. The point is that I have several times watched you. You walk out of your house, holding your head high, 20 paces from home you let it sink and fold your hands behind your back. You look and evidently see nothing before nor beside you. At last you begin moving your lips and talking to yourself, and sometimes you wave one hand and declaim, and at last stand still in the middle of the road. That's not at all the thing. Someone may be watching you besides me, and it won't do you any good. It's nothing really to do with me, and I can't cure you, but of course you understand me." "Do you know that I am being followed?" asked Raskolnikov, looking inquisitively at him. "No, I know nothing about it," said Svidrigaïlov, seeming surprised. "Well then, let us leave me alone," Raskolnikov muttered, frowning. "Very good, let us leave you alone." "You had better tell me, if you come here to drink, and directed me twice to come here to you, why did you hide and try to get away just now when I looked at the window from the street? I saw it." "And why was it you lay on your sofa with closed eyes and pretended to be asleep, though you were wide awake while I stood in your doorway? I saw it." "I may have had reasons. You know that yourself." "And I may have had my reasons, though you don't know them." Raskolnikov dropped his right elbow on the table, leaned his chin in the fingers of his right hand, and stared intently at Svidrigaïlov. For a full minute he scrutinised his face, which had impressed him before. It was a strange face like a mask, white and red, with bright red lips, with a flaxen beard, and still thick flaxen hair. His eyes were somehow too blue, and their expression somehow too heavy and fixed. There was something awfully unpleasant in that handsome face, which looked so wonderfully young for his age. Svidrigaïlov was smartly dressed in light summer clothes and was particularly dainty in his linen. He wore a huge ring with a precious stone in it. "Have I got to bother myself about you too now?" said Raskolnikov suddenly, coming with nervous impatience straight to the point. "Even though perhaps you are the most dangerous man, if you care to injure me, I don't want to put myself out any more. I will show you at once that I don't prize myself as you probably think I do. I've come to tell you at once that if you keep to your former intentions with regard to my sister, and if you think to derive any benefit in that direction from what has been discovered of late, I will kill you before you get me locked up. You can reckon on my word. You know that I can keep it. And in the second place, if you want to tell me anything, for I keep fancying all this time that you have something to tell me, make haste and tell it, for time is precious and very likely it will soon be too late." "Why in such haste?" asked Svidrigaïlov, looking at him curiously. "Everyone has his plans," Raskolnikov answered gloomily and impatiently. "You urged me yourself to frankness just now, and at the first question you refused to answer," Svidrigaïlov observed with a smile. "You keep fancying that I have aims of my own, and so you look at me with suspicion. Of course it's perfectly natural in your position. But though I should like to be friends with you, I shan't trouble myself to convince you of the contrary. The game isn't worth the candle, and I wasn't intending to talk to you about anything special." "What did you want me for then? It was you who came hanging about me." "Why, simply as an interesting subject for observation. I liked the fantastic nature of your position, that's what it was. Besides, you are the brother of a person who greatly interested me, and from that person I had in the past heard a very great deal about you, from which I gathered that you had a great influence over her. Isn't that enough? Ha ha! Still, I must admit that your question is rather complex and is difficult for me to answer. Here you, for instance, have come to me not only for a definite object, but for the sake of hearing something new. Isn't that so? Isn't that so?" persisted Svidrigaïlov with a sly smile. "Well, can't you fancy then that I, too, on my way here in the train, was reckoning on you, on your telling me something new, and on my making some profit out of you? You see what rich men we are." "What profit could you make?" "How can I tell you? How do I know? You see in what a tavern I spend all my time, and it's my enjoyment, that's to say it's no great enjoyment, but one must sit somewhere. That poor Katya now, you saw her? If only I had been a glutton now, a club gourmand, but you see I can eat this." He pointed to a little table in the corner where the remnants of a terrible looking beefsteak and potatoes lay on a tin dish. "Have you dined, by the way? I've had something and want nothing more. I don't drink, for instance, at all. Except for champagne, I never touch anything, and not more than a glass of that all the evening, and even that is enough to make my head ache. I ordered it just now to wind myself up, for I am just going off somewhere and you see me in a peculiar state of mind. That was why I hid myself just now like a schoolboy, for I was afraid you would hinder me. But I believe," he pulled out his watch, "I can spend an hour with you. It's 4:30 now. If only I'd been something, a landowner, a father, a cavalry officer, a photographer, a journalist. I am nothing, no specialty, and sometimes I am positively bored. I really thought you would tell me something new." "But what are you? And why have you come here?" "What am I? You know, a gentleman. I served for 2 years in the cavalry, then I knocked about here in Petersburg, then I married Marfa Petrovna and lived in the country. There you have my biography." "You are a gambler, I believe?" "No, a poor sort of gambler. A card sharper, not a gambler." "You have been a card sharper then?" "Yes, I've been a card sharper too." "Didn't you get thrashed sometimes?" "Oh, it did happen. Why?" "Why, you might have challenged them. Altogether it must have been lively." "I won't contradict you, and besides I am no hand at philosophy. I confess that I hastened here for the sake of the women." "As soon as you buried Marfa Petrovna?" "Quite so." Svidrigaïlov smiled with engaging candour. "What of it? You seem to find something wrong in my speaking like that about women." "You ask whether I find anything wrong in vice." "Vice? Oh, that's what you are after! But I'll answer you in order, first about women in general. You know I am fond of talking. Tell me, what should I restrain myself for? Why should I give up women, since I have a passion for them? It's an occupation, anyway." "So you hope for nothing here but vice?" "Oh, very well, for vice then. You insist on its being vice. But anyway I like a direct question. In this vice, at least, there is something permanent, founded indeed upon nature and not dependent on fantasy, something present in the blood like an ever burning ember, for ever setting one on fire and, maybe, not to be quickly extinguished, even with years. You'll agree it's an occupation of a sort." "That's nothing to rejoice at. It's a disease and a dangerous one." "Oh, that's what you think, is it? I agree that it is a disease like everything that exceeds moderation. And of course in this one must exceed moderation. But in the first place, everybody does so in one way or another. And in the second place, of course, one ought to be moderate and prudent, however mean it may be. But what am I to do? If I hadn't this, I might have to shoot myself. I am ready to admit that a decent man ought to put up with being bored, but yet..." "And could you shoot yourself?" "Oh, come!" Svidrigaïlov parried with disgust. "Please don't speak of it," he added hurriedly, and with none of the bragging tone he had shown in all the previous conversation. His face quite changed. "I admit it's an unpardonable weakness, but I can't help it. I am afraid of death and I dislike its being talked of. Do you know that I am to a certain extent a mystic?" "Ah! The apparitions of Marfa Petrovna. Do they still go on visiting you?" "Oh, don't talk of them! There have been no more in Petersburg, confound them!" he cried, with an air of irritation. "Let's rather talk of that... though... I have not much time, and can't stay long with you, it's a pity. I should have found plenty to tell you." "What's your engagement? A woman?" "Yes, a woman, a casual incident. No, that's not what I want to talk of." "And the hideousness, the filthiness of all your surroundings. Doesn't that affect you? Have you lost the strength to stop yourself?" "And do you pretend to strength too? You surprised me just now, Rodion Romanovitch, though I knew beforehand it would be so. You preach to me about vice and aesthetics. You, a Schiller, you, an idealist! Of course that's all as it should be, and it would be surprising if it were not so, yet it is strange in reality. Ah, what a pity I have no time, for you're a most interesting type. And by the way, are you fond of Schiller? I am awfully fond of him." "But what a braggart you are!" Raskolnikov said with some disgust. "Upon my word I am not," answered Svidrigaïlov, laughing. "However, I won't dispute it, let me be a braggart, why not brag if it hurts no one? I spent 7 years in the country with Marfa Petrovna, so now when I come across an intelligent person like you, intelligent and highly interesting, I am simply glad to talk, and besides, I've drunk that half glass of champagne and it's gone to my head a little. And besides there's a certain fact that has wound me up tremendously, but about that I will keep quiet. Where are you off to?" he asked in alarm. Raskolnikov had begun getting up. He felt oppressed and stifled and, as it were, ill at ease at having come here. He felt convinced that Svidrigaïlov was the most worthless scoundrel on the face of the earth. "Ach, sit down, stay a little," Svidrigaïlov begged. "Let them bring you some tea, anyway. Stay a little, I won't talk nonsense, about myself, I mean. I'll tell you something. If you like, I'll tell you how a woman tried to save me, as you would call it. It will be an answer to your first question indeed, for the woman was your sister. May I tell you? It will help to spend the time." "Tell me, but I trust that you..." "Oh, don't be uneasy. Besides, even in a worthless, low fellow like me, Avdotya Romanovna can only excite the deepest respect." End of Part 6, Chapter 3. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine. Part 6, Chapter 4 of Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Translated by Constance Garnett. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine. Part 6, Chapter 4. "You know perhaps... yes, I told you myself," began Svidrigaïlov, "that I was in the debtors' prison here for an immense sum, and had not any expectation of being able to pay it. There's no need to go into particulars how Marfa Petrovna bought me out. Do you know to what a point of insanity a woman can sometimes love? She was an honest woman and very sensible, although completely uneducated. Would you believe that this honest and jealous woman, after many scenes of hysterics and reproaches, condescended to enter into a kind of contract with me which she kept throughout our married life? She was considerably older than I, and besides, she always kept a clove or something in her mouth. There was so much swinishness in my soul, and honesty too of a sort, as to tell her straight out that I couldn't be absolutely faithful to her. This confession drove her to frenzy, but yet she seems, in a way, to have liked my brutal frankness. She thought it showed I was unwilling to deceive her if I warned her like this beforehand, and for a jealous woman, you know, that's the first consideration. After many tears, an unwritten contract was drawn up between us. First, that I would never leave Marfa Petrovna and would always be her husband. Secondly, that I would never absent myself without her permission. Thirdly, that I would never set up a permanent mistress. Fourthly, in return for this Marfa Petrovna gave me a free hand with the maidservants, but only with her secret knowledge. Fifthly, God forbid my falling in love with a woman of our class. Sixthly, in case I, which God forbid, should be visited by a great serious passion, I was bound to reveal it to Marfa Petrovna. On this last score, however, Marfa Petrovna was fairly at ease. She was a sensible woman, and so she could not help looking upon me as a dissolute profligate incapable of real love. But a sensible woman and a jealous woman are two very different things, and that's where the trouble came in. But to judge some people impartially, we must renounce certain preconceived opinions and our habitual attitude to the ordinary people about us. I have reason to have faith in your judgment rather than in anyone's. Perhaps you have already heard a great deal that was ridiculous and absurd about Marfa Petrovna. She certainly had some very ridiculous ways, but I tell you frankly that I feel really sorry for the innumerable woes of which I was the cause. Well, and that's enough, I think, by way of a decorous oraison funèbre for the most tender wife of a most tender husband. When we quarrelled, I usually held my tongue and did not irritate her, and that gentlemanly conduct rarely failed to attain its object. It influenced her, it pleased her indeed. These were times when she was positively proud of me. But your sister she couldn't put up with, anyway, and however she came to risk taking such a beautiful creature into her house as a governess...
My explanation is that Marfa Petrovna was an ardent and impressionable woman, and simply fell in love herself, literally fell in love with your sister. Well, little wonder! Look at Avdotya Romanovna. I saw the danger at the first glance, and what do you think? I resolved not to look at her even. But Avdotya Romanovna herself made the first step, would you believe it? Would you believe it, too, that Marfa Petrovna was positively angry with me at first for my persistent silence about your sister, for my careless reception of her continual adoring praises of Avdotya Romanovna. I don't know what it was she wanted. Well, of course Marfa Petrovna told Avdotya Romanovna every detail about me. She had the unfortunate habit of telling literally everyone all our family secrets and continually complaining of me. How could she fail to confide in such a delightful new friend? I expect they talked of nothing else but me, and no doubt Avdotya Romanovna heard all those dark mysterious rumours that were current about me. I don't mind betting that you too have heard something of the sort already." "I have. Luzhin charged you with having caused the death of a child. Is that true?" "Don't refer to those vulgar tales, I beg," said Svidrigaïlov with disgust and annoyance. "If you insist on wanting to know about all that idiocy, I will tell you one day, but now..." "I was told, too, about some footman of yours in the country whom you treated badly." "I beg you to drop the subject," Svidrigaïlov interrupted again with obvious impatience. "Was that the footman who came to you after death to fill your pipe? You told me about it yourself." Raskolnikov felt more and more irritated. Svidrigaïlov looked at him attentively, and Raskolnikov fancied he caught a flash of spiteful mockery in that look. But Svidrigaïlov restrained himself and answered very civilly: "Yes, it was. I see that you, too, are extremely interested and shall feel it my duty to satisfy your curiosity at the first opportunity. Upon my soul, I see that I might really have passed for a romantic figure with some people. Judge how grateful I must be to Marfa Petrovna for having repeated to Avdotya Romanovna such mysterious and interesting gossip about me. I dare not guess what impression it made on her, but in any case it worked in my interests. With all Avdotya Romanovna's natural aversion, and in spite of my invariably gloomy and repellent aspect, she did at least feel pity for me, pity for a lost soul. And if once a girl's heart is moved to pity, it's more dangerous than anything. She is bound to want to save him, to bring him to his senses, and lift him up, and draw him to nobler aims, and restore him to new life and usefulness. Well, we all know how far such dreams can go. I saw at once that the bird was flying into the cage of herself. And I too made ready. I think you are frowning, Rodion Romanovitch. There's no need. As you know, it all ended in smoke. Hang it all, what a lot I am drinking! Do you know, I always, from the very beginning, regretted that it wasn't your sister's fate to be born in the second or third century A.D. as the daughter of a reigning prince, or some governor or proconsul in Asia Minor. She would undoubtedly have been one of those who would endure martyrdom, and would have smiled when they branded her bosom with hot pincers. And she would have gone to it of herself, and in the fourth or fifth century she would have walked away into the Egyptian desert, and would have stayed there 30 years, living on roots and ecstasies and visions. She is simply thirsting to face some torture for someone, and if she can't get her torture, she'll throw herself out of a window. I've heard something of a Mr. Razumihin. He's said to be a sensible fellow; his surname suggests it indeed. He's probably a divinity student. Well, he'd better look after your sister. I believe I understand her, and I am proud of it, but at the beginning of an acquaintance, as you know, one is apt to be more heedless and stupid. One doesn't see clearly. Hang it all, why is she so handsome? It's not my fault. In fact, it began on my side with a most irresistible physical desire. Avdotya Romanovna is awfully chaste, incredibly and phenomenally so. Take note, I tell you this about your sister as a fact. She is almost morbidly chaste, in spite of her broad intelligence, and it will stand in her way. There happened to be a girl in the house then, Parasha, a black-eyed wench whom I had never seen before. She had just come from another village, very pretty, but incredibly stupid. She burst into tears, wailed so that she could be heard all over the place, and caused scandal. One day after dinner Avdotya Romanovna followed me into an avenue in the garden and with flashing eyes insisted on my leaving poor Parasha alone. It was almost our first conversation by ourselves. I, of course, was only too pleased to obey her wishes, tried to appear disconcerted, embarrassed, in fact, played my part not badly. Then came interviews, mysterious conversations, exhortations, entreaties, supplications, even tears. Would you believe it? Even tears! Think what the passion for propaganda will bring some girls to. I, of course, threw it all on my destiny, posed as hungering and thirsting for light, and finally resorted to the most powerful weapon in the subjection of the female heart, a weapon which never fails one. It's the well-known resource, flattery. Nothing in the world is harder than speaking the truth, and nothing easier than flattery. If there's the hundredth part of a false note in speaking the truth, it leads to a discord, and that leads to trouble. But if all to the last note is false in flattery, it is just as agreeable, and is heard not without satisfaction. It may be a coarse satisfaction, but still a satisfaction. And however coarse the flattery, at least half will be sure to seem true. That's so for all stages of development and classes of society. A Vestal Virgin might be seduced by flattery. I can never remember without laughter how I once seduced a lady who was devoted to her husband, her children, and her principles. What fun it was, and how little trouble! And the lady really had principles of her own, anyway. All my tactics lay in simply being utterly annihilated and prostrate before her purity. I flattered her shamelessly, and as soon as I succeeded in getting a pressure of the hand, even a glance from her, I would reproach myself for having snatched it by force, and would declare that she had resisted, so that I could never have gained anything but for my being so unprincipled. I maintained that she was so innocent that she could not foresee my treachery, and yielded to me unconsciously, unawares, and so on. In fact, I triumphed, while my lady remained firmly convinced that she was innocent, chaste, and faithful to all her duties and obligations, and had succumbed quite by accident. Oh, and how angry she was with me when I explained to her at last that it was my sincere conviction that she was just as eager as I. Poor Marfa Petrovna was awfully weak on the side of flattery, and if I had only cared to, I might have had all her property settled on me during her lifetime. Oh, I am drinking an awful lot of wine now and talking too much. I hope you won't be angry if I mention now that I was beginning to produce the same effect on Avdotya Romanovna. But I was stupid and impatient and spoiled it all. Avdotya Romanovna had several times, and one time in particular, been greatly displeased by the expression of my eyes, would you believe it? There was sometimes a light in them which frightened her, and grew stronger and more unguarded, till it was hateful to her. No need to go into detail, but we parted. There I acted stupidly again. I fell to jeering in the coarsest way at all such propaganda and efforts to convert me. Parasha came on to the scene again, and not she alone; in fact there was a tremendous to do. Ah, Rodion Romanovitch, if you could only see how your sister's eyes can flash sometimes! Never mind my being drunk at this moment and having had a whole glass of wine. I am speaking the truth. I assure you that this glance has haunted my dreams. The very rustle of her dress was more than I could stand at last. I really began to think that I might become epileptic. I could never have believed that I could be moved to such a frenzy. It was essential indeed to be reconciled, but by then it was impossible. And imagine what I did then! To what a pitch of stupidity a man can be brought by frenzy! Never undertake anything in a frenzy, Rodion Romanovitch. I reflected that Avdotya Romanovna was, after all, a beggar. Excuse me, that's not the word, but does it matter if it expresses the meaning? That she lived by her work, that she had her mother and you to keep hang it, you are frowning again! And I resolved to offer her all my money. 30,000 roubles I could have realised then, if she would run away with me here, to Petersburg. Of course I should have vowed eternal love, rapture and so on. Do you know, I was so wild about her at that time that if she had told me to poison Marfa Petrovna or to cut her throat and to marry herself, it would have been done at once. But it ended in the catastrophe of which you know already. You can fancy how frantic I was when I had heard that Marfa Petrovna had got hold of that scoundrelly attorney, Luzhin, and had almost made a match between them, which would really have been just the same thing as I was proposing, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it? I notice that you've begun to be very attentive, you interesting young man." Svidrigaïlov struck the table with his fist impatiently. He was flushed. Raskolnikov saw clearly that the glass or glass and a half of champagne that he had sipped almost unconsciously was affecting him, and he resolved to take advantage of the opportunity. He felt very suspicious of Svidrigaïlov. "Well, after what you have said, I am fully convinced that you have come to Petersburg with designs on my sister," he said directly to Svidrigaïlov, in order to irritate him further. "Oh, nonsense!" said Svidrigaïlov, seeming to rouse himself. "Why, I told you. Besides, your sister can't endure me." "Well, yes, I'm certain that she can't, but that's not the point." "Are you so sure that she can't?" Svidrigaïlov screwed up his eyes and smiled mockingly. "You are right, she doesn't love me, but you can never be sure of what has passed between husband and wife or lover and mistress. There's always a little corner which remains a secret to the world and is only known to those two. Will you answer for it that Avdotya Romanovna regarded me with aversion?" "Well, from some words you've dropped, I notice that you still have designs, and of course evil ones, on Dounia, and mean to carry them out promptly." "What, have I dropped words like that?" Svidrigaïlov asked in naïve dismay, taking not the slightest notice of the epithet bestowed on his designs. "Why, you are dropping them even now. Why are you so frightened? What are you so afraid of now?" "Me? Afraid? Afraid of you? You have rather to be afraid of me, cher ami. But what nonsense! I've drunk too much, though, I see that. I was almost saying too much again. Damn the wine! Hi, there, water!" He snatched up the champagne bottle and flung it without ceremony out of the window. Philip brought the water. "It's all nonsense," said Svidrigaïlov, wetting a towel and putting it to his head. "But I can answer you in one word and annihilate all your suspicions. Do you know that I am going to get married?" "You told me so before." "Did I? I've forgotten. But I couldn't have told you so for certain, for I had not even seen my betrothed, I only meant to. But now I really have a betrothed and it's a settled thing, and if it weren't that I have business that can't be put off, I would have taken you to see them at once, for I should like to ask your advice. Ah, hang it, only 10 minutes left. See, look at the watch. But I must tell you, for it's an interesting story, my marriage, in its own way. Where are you off to? Going again?" "No, I'm not going away now." "Not at all? We shall see. I'll take you there. I'll show you my betrothed, only not now, for you'll soon have to be off. You have to go to the right and I to the left. Do you know that Madame Resslich, the woman I am living with now, eh? I know what you're thinking, that she's the woman whose girl they say drowned herself in the winter. Come, are you listening? She arranged it all for me. 'You're bored,' she said. 'You want something to fill up your time.' For you know, I am a gloomy, depressed person. Do you think I'm light‐hearted? No, I'm gloomy. I do no harm, but sit in a corner without speaking a word for 3 days at a time. And that Resslich is a sly hussy, I tell you. I know what she has got in her mind, she thinks I shall get sick of it, abandon my wife and depart, and she'll get hold of her and make a profit out of her, in our class, of course, or higher. She told me the father was a broken‐down retired official who has been sitting in a chair for the last 3 years with his legs paralysed. The mamma, she said, was a sensible woman. There's a son serving in the provinces, but he doesn't help, there is a daughter who is married, but she doesn't visit them. And they've 2 little nephews on their hands, as though their own children were not enough, and they've taken from school their youngest daughter, a girl who'll be 16 in another month, so that then she can be married. She was for me. We went there. How funny it was! I present myself, a landowner, a widower, of a well‐known name, with connections, with a fortune. What if I am 50 and she's not 16? Who thinks of that? But it's fascinating, isn't it? It is fascinating. You should have seen how I talked to the papa and mamma. It was worth paying to have seen me at that moment. She comes in, curtseys, you can fancy, still in a short frock, an unopened bud, flushing like a sunset, she had been told, no doubt. I don't know how you feel about female faces, but to my mind these 16 years, these childish eyes, shyness and tears of bashfulness are better than beauty. And she is a perfect little picture too. Fair hair and little curls like a lamb's, full little rosy lips, tiny feet, a charmer. Well, we made friends. I told him I was in a hurry owing to domestic circumstances, and the next day, that is the day before yesterday, we were betrothed. When I go now, I take her on my knee at once and keep her there. Well, she flushes like a sunset, and I kiss her every minute. Her mamma, of course, impresses on her that this is her husband and that this must be so. It's simply delicious. The present betrothed condition is perhaps better than marriage. Here you have what is called la nature et la vérité. Ha ha! I've talked to her twice. She's far from a fool. Sometimes she steals a look at me that positively scorches me. Her face is like Raphael's Madonna. You know, the Sistine Madonna's face has something fantastic in it, the face of mournful religious ecstasy. Haven't you noticed it? Well, she's something in that line. The day after we'd been betrothed, I bought her presents to the value of 1,500 roubles, a set of diamonds and another of pearls and a silver dressing case as large as this, with all sorts of things in it, so that even my Madonna's face glowed. I sat her on my knee yesterday, and I suppose rather too unceremoniously she flushed crimson and the tears started, but she didn't want to show it. We were left alone, she suddenly flung herself on my neck, for the first time of her own accord, put her little arms round me, kissed me, and vowed that she would be an obedient, faithful and good wife, would make me happy, would devote all her life, every minute of her life, would sacrifice everything, everything, and that all she asks in return is my respect, and that she wants nothing, nothing more from me, no presents. You'll admit that to hear such a confession alone, from an angel of 16 in a muslin frock, with little curls, with a flush of maiden shyness in her cheeks and tears of enthusiasm in her eyes, is rather fascinating. Isn't it fascinating? It's worth paying for, isn't it? Well, listen, we'll go to see my betrothed, only not just now. The fact is, this monstrous difference in age and development excites your sensuality. Will you really make such a marriage? Why, of course. Everyone thinks of himself, and he lives most gaily who knows best how to deceive himself. But why are you so keen about virtue? Have mercy on me, my good friend. I am a sinful man. Oh, but you have provided for the children of Katerina Ivanovna, though you had your own reasons, I understand it all now. "I am always fond of children, very fond of them," laughed Svidrigaïlov. "I can tell you one curious instance of it. The first day I came here, I visited various haunts. After 7 years I simply rushed at them. You probably noticed that I am not in a hurry to renew acquaintance with my old friends. I shall do without them as long as I can. Do you know, when I was with Marfa Petrovna in the country, I was haunted by the thought of these places where anyone who knows his way about can find a great deal. Yes, upon my soul. The peasants have vodka, the educated young people, shut out from activity, waste themselves in impossible dreams and visions, and are crippled by theories. Jews have sprung up and are amassing money, and all the rest give themselves up to debauchery. From the first hour the town reeked of its familiar odours. I chanced to be in a frightful den. I like my dens dirty. It was a dance, so called, and there was a can-can, such as I never saw in my day. Yes, there you have progress. All of a sudden I saw a little girl of 13, nicely dressed, dancing with a specialist in that line, with another one vis-à-vis. Her mother was sitting on a chair by the wall. You can't fancy what a can-can that was. The girl was ashamed, blushed, at last felt insulted and began to cry. Her partner seized her and began whirling her round and performing before her. Everyone laughed, and I like your public, even the can-can public. They laughed and shouted, 'Serves her right, serves her right, shouldn't bring children.' Well, it's not my business whether that consoling reflection was logical or not. I at once fixed on my plan, sat down by the mother, and began by saying that I too was a stranger and that people here were ill-bred, and that they couldn't distinguish decent folks and treat them with respect. Gave her to understand that I had plenty of money, offered to take them home in my carriage. I took them home and got to know them. They were lodging in a miserable little hole and had only just arrived from the country. She told me that she and her daughter could only regard my acquaintance as an honour. I found out that they had nothing of their own and had come to town upon some legal business. I proffered my services and money. I learnt that they had gone to the dancing saloon by mistake, believing that it was a genuine dancing class. I offered to assist in the young girl's education in French and dancing. My offer was accepted with enthusiasm as an honour, and we are still friendly. If you like, we'll go and see them, only not just now." "Stop! Enough of your vile, nasty anecdotes, depraved, vile, sensual man!" "Oh, Schiller! You are a regular Schiller! Oh, la vertu va-t-elle se nicher? But you know I shall tell these things on purpose, for the pleasure of hearing your outcries." "I dare say. I can see I am ridiculous myself," muttered Raskolnikov angrily. Svidrigaïlov laughed heartily. Finally he called Philip, paid his bill and began getting up. "I say, but I am drunk, assez causé," he said. "It's been a pleasure." "I should rather think it must be a pleasure," cried Raskolnikov, getting up. "No doubt it is a pleasure for a worn out profligate to describe such adventures with a monstrous project of the same sort in his mind, especially under such circumstances, and to such a man as me. It's stimulating." "Well, if you come to that," Svidrigaïlov answered, scrutinising Raskolnikov with some surprise, "if you come to that, you are a thorough cynic yourself. You've plenty to make you so, anyway. You can understand a great deal and you can do a great deal too. But enough! I sincerely regret not having had more talk with you, but I shan't lose sight of you. Only wait a bit." Svidrigaïlov walked out of the restaurant. Raskolnikov walked out after him. Svidrigaïlov was not, however, very drunk, the wine had affected him for a moment, but it was passing off every minute. He was preoccupied with something of importance and was frowning. He was apparently excited and uneasy in anticipation of something. His manner to Raskolnikov had changed during the last few minutes and he was ruder and more sneering every moment. Raskolnikov noticed all this and he, too, was uneasy. He became very suspicious of Svidrigaïlov and resolved to follow him. They came out on to the pavement. "You go to the right and I to the left, or, if you like, the other way. Only adieu, mon plaisir. May we meet again?" And he walked to the right, towards the Haymarket. End of Part 6, Chapter 4. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine. Part 6, Chapter 5. Of Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Translated by Constance Garnett. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine. Part 6, Chapter 5. Raskolnikov walked after him. "What's this?" cried Svidrigaïlov, turning round. "I thought I said..." "It means that I am not going to lose sight of you now." "What?" Both stood still and gazed at one another, as though measuring their strength. "From all your half‐tipsy stories," Raskolnikov observed harshly, "I am positive that you have not given up your designs on my sister, but are pursuing them more actively than ever. I have learnt that my sister received a letter this morning. You have hardly been able to sit still all this time. You may have unearthed a wife on the way, but that means nothing. I should like to make certain myself." Raskolnikov could hardly have said himself what he wanted, and of what he wished to make certain. "Upon my word, I'll call the police." "Call away." Again they stood for a minute facing each other. At last Svidrigaïlov's face changed. Having satisfied himself that Raskolnikov was not frightened at his threat, he assumed a mirthful and friendly air. "What a fellow! I purposely refrained from referring to your affair, though I am devoured by curiosity. It's a fantastic affair. I put it off till another time, but you're enough to rouse the dead. Well, let us go. Only I warn you beforehand, I am only going home for a moment to get some money, then I shall lock up the flat, take a cab and go to spend the evening at the islands. Now are you going to follow me? I'm coming to your lodgings, not to see you, but Sofya Semyonovna, to say I'm sorry not to have been at the funeral." "Well, that's as you like, but Sofya Semyonovna is not at home. She has taken the 3 children to an old lady of high rank, the patroness of some orphan asylums whom I used to know years ago. I charmed the old lady by depositing a sum of money with her to provide for the 3 children of Katerina Ivanovna, and subscribing to the institution as well. I told her, too, the story of Sofya Semyonovna in full detail. Suppressing nothing, it produced an indescribable effect on her. That's why Sofya Semyonovna has been invited to call to day at the X. hotel, where the lady is staying for the time. No matter, I'll come all the same." "As you like, it's nothing to me, but I won't come with you. Here we are at home. By the way, I am convinced that you regard me with suspicion just because I have shown such delicacy and have not so far troubled you with questions. You understand? It struck you as extraordinary. I don't mind betting it's that. Well, it teaches one to show delicacy. And to listen at doors. Ah, that's it, is it?" laughed Svidrigaïlov. "Yes, I should have been surprised if you had let that pass after all that has happened. Ha! Though I did understand something of the pranks you had been up to and were telling Sofya Semyonovna about, what was the meaning of it? Perhaps I am quite behind the times and can't understand. For goodness' sake, explain it, my dear boy. Expound the latest theories." "You couldn't have heard anything. You're making it all up. But I'm not talking about that, though I did hear something. No, I'm talking of the way you keep sighing and groaning now. The Schiller in you is in revolt every moment. And now you tell me not to listen at doors. If that's how you feel, go and inform the police that you had this mischance. You made a little mistake in your theory. But if you are convinced that one mustn't listen at doors, but one may murder old women at one's pleasure, you'd better be off to America and make haste. Run, young man. There may still be time. I'm speaking sincerely. Haven't you the money? I'll give you the fare." "I'm not thinking of that at all," Raskolnikov interrupted with disgust. "I understand. But don't put yourself out, don't discuss it if you don't want to. I understand the questions you are worrying over, moral ones, aren't they? Duties of citizen and man. Lay them all aside, they are nothing to you now. You'll still say you're still a man and a citizen. If so, you ought not to have got into this coil. It's no use taking up a job you're not fit for. Well, you'd better shoot yourself, or don't you want to? You seem to be trying to enrage me, to make me leave you." What a queer fellow! But here we are. Welcome to the staircase. You see, that's the way to Sofya Semyonovna. Look, there's no one at home. Don't you believe me? Ask Kapernaumov. She leaves the key with him. Here is Madame de Kapernaumov herself. Hey, what? She's rather deaf. Has she gone out? Where? Did you hear? She is not in and won't be till late in the evening, probably. Well, come to my room. You wanted to come and see me, didn't you? Here we are. Madame Resslich's not at home. She is a woman who is always busy, an excellent woman, I assure you. She might have been of use to you if you'd been a little more sensible. Now see, I take this 5% bond out of the bureau. See what a lot I've got of them still. This one will be turned into cash to day. I mustn't waste any more time. The bureau is locked, the flat is locked, and here we are again on the stairs. Shall we take a cab? I'm going to the islands. Would you like a lift? I'll take this carriage. Ah, you refuse? You are tired of it? Come for a drive. I believe it will come on to rain. Never mind, we'll put down the hood." Svidrigaïlov was already in the carriage. Raskolnikov decided that his suspicions were at least for that moment unjust. Without answering a word, he turned and walked back towards the Hay Market. If he had only turned round on his way, he might have seen Svidrigaïlov get out not 100 paces off, dismiss the cab and walk along the pavement. But he had turned the corner and could see nothing. Intense disgust drew him away from Svidrigaïlov. "To think that I could for one instant have looked for help from that coarse brute, that depraved sensualist and blackguard!" he cried. Raskolnikov's judgment was uttered too lightly and hastily. There was something about Svidrigaïlov which gave him a certain original, even a mysterious character. As concerned his sister, Raskolnikov was convinced that Svidrigaïlov would not leave her in peace. But it was too tiresome and unbearable to go on thinking and thinking about this. When he was alone, he had not gone 20 paces before he sank, as usual, into deep thought. On the bridge he stood by the railing and began gazing at the water. And his sister was standing close by him. He met her at the entrance to the bridge, but passed by without seeing her. Dounia had never met him like this in the street before and was struck with dismay. She stood still and did not know whether to call to him or not. Suddenly she saw Svidrigaïlov coming quickly from the direction of the Hay Market. He seemed to be approaching cautiously. He did not go on to the bridge, but stood aside on the pavement, doing all he could to avoid Raskolnikov seeing him. He had observed Dounia for some time and had been making signs to her. She fancied he was signalling to beg her not to speak to her brother, but to come to him. That was what Dounia did. She stole by her brother and went up to Svidrigaïlov. "Let us make haste away," Svidrigaïlov whispered to her. "I don't want Rodion Romanovitch to know of our meeting. I must tell you, I've been sitting with him in the restaurant close by, where he looked me up, and I had great difficulty in getting rid of him. He has somehow heard of my letter to you and suspects everything. It wasn't you who told him, of course, but if not you, who then?" "Well, we've turned the corner now," Dounia interrupted, "and my brother won't see us. I have to tell you that I am going no further with you. Speak to me here. You can tell it all in the street." "In the first place, I can't say it in the street. Secondly, you must hear Sofya Semyonovna too. And thirdly, I will show you some papers. Oh, well, if you won't agree to come with me, I shall refuse to give any explanation and go away at once. But I beg you not to forget that a very curious secret of your beloved brother's is entirely in my keeping." Dounia stood still, hesitating, and looked at Svidrigaïlov with searching eyes. "What are you afraid of?" he observed quietly. "The town is not the country, and even in the country you did me more harm than I did you." "Have you prepared Sofya Semyonovna?" "No, I have not said a word to her, and am not quite certain whether she is at home now. But most likely she is. She has buried her stepmother to day; she is not likely to go visiting on such a day. For the time I don't want to speak to anyone about it, and I half regret having spoken to you. The slightest indiscretion is as bad as betrayal in a thing like this. I live there in that house, we are coming to it. That's the porter of our house. He knows me very well. You see, he's bowing. He sees I'm coming with a lady, and no doubt he has noticed your face already, and you will be glad of that if you are afraid of me and suspicious. Excuse my putting things so coarsely. I haven't a flat to myself. Sofya Semyonovna's room is next to mine, she lodges in the next flat. The whole floor is let out in lodgings. Why are you frightened like a child? Am I really so terrible?" Svidrigaïlov's lips were twisted in a condescending smile, but he was in no smiling mood. His heart was throbbing and he could scarcely breathe. He spoke rather loud to cover his growing excitement. But Dounia did not notice this peculiar excitement, she was so irritated by his remark that she was frightened of him like a child, and that he was so terrible to her. "Though I know that you are not a man of honour, I am not in the least afraid of you. Lead the way," she said with apparent composure, but her face was very pale. Svidrigaïlov stopped at Sonia's room. "Allow me to inquire whether she is at home." "She is not. How unfortunate! But I know she may come quite soon. If she's gone out, it can only be to see a lady about the orphans. Their mother is dead. I've been meddling in making arrangements for them. If Sofya Semyonovna does not come back in 10 minutes, I will send her to you to day if you like. This is my flat, these are my 2 rooms. Madame Resslich, my landlady, has the next room. Now, look this way, I will show you my chief piece of evidence. This door from my bedroom leads into 2 perfectly empty rooms which are to let. Here they are. You must look into them with some attention." Svidrigaïlov occupied 2 fairly large furnished rooms. Dounia was looking about her mistrustfully, but saw nothing special in the furniture or position of the rooms. Yet there was something to observe, for instance that Svidrigaïlov's flat was exactly between 2 sets of almost uninhabited apartments. His rooms were not entered directly from the passage, but through the landlady's 2 almost empty rooms. Unlocking a door leading out of his bedroom, Svidrigaïlov showed Dounia the 2 empty rooms that were to let. Dounia stopped in the doorway, not knowing what she was called to look upon, but Svidrigaïlov hastened to explain. "Look here, at this second large room. Notice that door, it's locked. By the door stands a chair, the only one in the 2 rooms. I brought it from my room so as to listen more conveniently. Just the other side of the door is Sofya Semyonovna's table, she sat there talking to Rodion Romanovitch. And I sat here listening on 2 successive evenings, for 2 hours each time. And of course I was able to learn something. What do you think?" "You listened?" "Yes, I did. Now come back to my room, we can't sit down here." He brought Avdotya Romanovna back into his sitting room and offered her a chair. He sat down at the opposite side of the table, at least 7 feet from her. But probably there was the same glow in his eyes which had once frightened Dounia so much. She shuddered and once more looked about her distrustfully. It was an involuntary gesture; she evidently did not wish to betray her uneasiness. But the secluded position of Svidrigaïlov's lodging had suddenly struck her. She wanted to ask whether his landlady, at least, were at home, but pride kept her from asking. Moreover, she had another trouble in her heart incomparably greater than fear for herself. She was in great distress. "Here is your letter," she said, laying it on the table. "Can it be true what you write? You hint at a crime committed, you say, by my brother. You hint at it too clearly. You daren't deny it now. I must tell you that I'd heard of this stupid story before you wrote and don't believe a word of it. It's a disgusting and ridiculous suspicion. I know the story and why and how it was invented. You can have no proofs. You promised to prove it. Speak. But let me warn you that I don't believe you. I don't believe you." Dounia said this speaking hurriedly, and for an instant the colour rushed to her face. "If you didn't believe it, how could you risk coming alone to my rooms? Why have you come? Simply from curiosity?" "Don't torment me! Speak, speak!" "There's no denying that you are a brave girl. Upon my word, I thought you would have asked Mr. Razumihin to escort you here. But he was not with you nor anywhere near. I was on the look out. It's spirited of you. It proves you wanted to spare Rodion Romanovitch. But everything is divine in you. About your brother, what am I to say to you? You've just seen him yourself. What did you think of him?" "Surely that's not the only thing you are building on?" "No, not on that, but on his own words. He came here on 2 successive evenings to see Sofya Semyonovna. I've shown you where they sat. He made a full confession to her. He is a murderer. He killed an old woman, a pawnbroker, with whom he had pawned things himself. He killed her sister, too, a pedlar woman called Lizaveta, who happened to come in while he was murdering her sister. He killed them with an axe he brought with him. He murdered them to rob them, and he did rob them. He took money and various things. He told all this, word for word, to Sofya Semyonovna, the only person who knows his secret. But she has had no share by word or deed in the murder, she was as horrified at it as you are now. Don't be anxious, she won't betray him." "It cannot be," muttered Dounia with white lips. She gasped for breath. "It cannot be! There was not the slightest cause, no sort of ground! It's a lie, a lie!" "He robbed her, that was the cause. He took money and things. It's true that by his own admission he made no use of the money or things, but hid them under a stone where they are now. But that was because he dared not make use of them." "But how could he steal, rob? How could he dream of it?" cried Dounia, and she jumped up from the chair. "Why, you know him, and you've seen him. Can he be a thief?" She seemed to be imploring Svidrigaïlov. She had entirely forgotten her fear. "There are thousands and millions of combinations and possibilities, Avdotya Romanovna. A thief steals and knows he is a scoundrel, but I've heard of a gentleman who broke open the mail. Who knows, very likely he thought he was doing a gentlemanly thing. Of course I should not have believed it myself if I'd been told of it as you have, but I believe my own ears. He explained all the causes of it to Sofya Semyonovna too, but she did not believe her ears at first, yet she believed her own eyes at last." "What were the causes?" "It's a long story, Avdotya Romanovna. Here's how shall I tell you? A theory of a sort, the same one by which I, for instance, consider that a single misdeed is permissible if the principal aim is right, a solitary wrong‐doing and hundreds of good deeds. It's galling too, of course, for a young man of gifts and overweening pride to know that if he had, for instance, a paltry 3,000, his whole career, his whole future would be differently shaped, and yet not to have that 3,000. Add to that nervous irritability from hunger, from lodging in a hole, from rags, from a vivid sense of the charm of his social position and his sister's and mother's position too. Above all, vanity, pride and vanity, though goodness knows he may have good qualities too. I am not blaming him, please don't think it. Besides, it's not my business. A special little theory came in too, a theory of a sort, dividing mankind, you see, into material and superior persons, that is, persons to whom the law does not apply, owing to their superiority, who make laws for the rest of mankind, the material, that is. It's all right as a theory, une théorie comme une autre. Napoleon attracted him tremendously, that is, what affected him was that a great many men of genius have not hesitated at wrong‐doing, but have overstepped the law without thinking about it. He seems to have fancied that he was a genius too, that is, he was convinced of it for a time. He has suffered a great deal and is still suffering from the idea that he could make a theory, but was incapable of boldly overstepping the law, and so he is not a man of genius. And that's humiliating for a young man of any pride, in our day especially. But remorse? You deny him any moral feeling then? Is he like that? Ah, Avdotya Romanovna, everything is in a muddle now, not that it was ever in very good order. Russians in general are broad in their ideas, Avdotya Romanovna, broad like their land and exceedingly disposed to the fantastic, the chaotic. But it's a misfortune to be broad without a special genius. Do you remember what a lot of talk we had together on this subject, sitting in the evenings on the terrace after supper? Why, you used to reproach me with breadth. Who knows, perhaps we were talking at the very time when he was lying here thinking over his plan. There are no sacred traditions amongst us, especially in the educated class, Avdotya Romanovna. At the best someone will make them up somehow for himself out of books or from some old chronicle. But those are for the most part the learned and all old fogies, so that it would be almost ill-bred in a man of society. You know my opinions in general, though, I never blame anyone. I do nothing at all, I persevere in that. But we've talked of this more than once before. I was so happy indeed as to interest you in my opinions. You are very pale, Avdotya Romanovna. I know his theory. I read that article of his about men to whom all is permitted. Razumihin brought it to me. Mr. Razumihin? Your brother's article in a magazine? Is there such an article? I didn't know. It must be interesting. But where are you going, Avdotya Romanovna? "I want to see Sofya Semyonovna," Dounia articulated faintly. "How do I go to her? She has come in perhaps, I must see her at once. Perhaps she..." Avdotya Romanovna could not finish. Her breath literally failed her. "Sofya Semyonovna will not be back till night, at least I believe not. She was to have been back at once, but if not, then she will not be in till quite late." "Ah, then you are lying! I see you were lying, lying all the time. I don't believe you, I don't believe you," cried Dounia, completely losing her head. Almost fainting, she sank on to a chair which Svidrigaïlov made haste to give her. "Avdotya Romanovna, what is it? Control yourself. Here is some water, drink a little." He sprinkled some water over her. Dounia shuddered and came to herself. "It has acted violently," Svidrigaïlov muttered to himself, frowning. "Avdotya Romanovna, calm yourself. Believe me, he has friends. We will save him. Would you like me to take him abroad? I have money, I can get a ticket in 3 days. And as for the murder, he will do all sorts of good deeds yet to atone for it. Calm yourself, he may become a great man yet. Well, how are you? How do you feel?" "Cruel man! To be able to jeer at it! Let me go." "Where are you going?" "To him. Where is he? Do you know? Why is this door locked? We came in at that door and now it is locked. When did you manage to lock it?" "We couldn't be shouting all over the flat on such a subject. I am far from jeering. It's simply that I'm sick of talking like this. But how can you go in such a state? Do you want to betray him? You will drive him to fury and he will give himself up. Let me tell you, he is already being watched. They are already on his track. You will simply be giving him away. Wait a little. I saw him and was talking to him just now. He can still be saved. Wait a bit, sit down. Let us think it over together. I asked you to come in order to discuss it alone with you and to consider it thoroughly, but do sit down." "How can you save him? Can he really be saved?" Dounia sat down. Svidrigaïlov sat down beside her. "It all depends on you, on you, on you alone," he began with glowing eyes, almost in a whisper and hardly able to utter the words for emotion. Dounia drew back from him in alarm. He, too, was trembling all over. "You, one word from you and he is saved. I'll save him. I have money and friends. I'll send him away at once. I'll get a passport, 2 passports, one for him and one for me. I have friends, capable people. If you like, I'll take a passport for you, for your mother. What do you want with Razumihin? I love you too. I love you beyond everything. Let me kiss the hem of your dress, let me, the very rustle of it is too much for me. Tell me, do that and I'll do it. I'll do everything, I will do the impossible. What you believe, I will believe. I'll do anything, anything. Don't look at me like that. Do you know that you are killing me?" He was almost beginning to rave. Something seemed suddenly to go to his head. Dounia jumped up and rushed to the door. "Open it, open it!" she called, shaking the door. "Open it! Is there no one there?" Svidrigaïlov got up and came to himself. His still trembling lips slowly broke into an angry mocking smile. "There is no one at home," he said quietly and emphatically. "The landlady has gone out, and it's waste of time to shout like that. You are only exciting yourself uselessly." "Where is the key? Open the door at once, base man!" "I have lost the key and cannot find it." "This is an outrage!" cried Dounia, turning pale as death. She rushed to the furthest corner, where she made haste to barricade herself with a little table. She did not scream, but she fixed her eyes on her tormentor and watched every movement he made. Svidrigaïlov remained standing at the other end of the room facing her. He was positively composed, at least in appearance, but his face was pale as before. The mocking smile did not leave his face. "You spoke of outrage just now, Avdotya Romanovna. In that case you may be sure I've taken measures. Sofya Semyonovna is not at home. The Kapernaumovs are far away, there are 5 locked rooms between. I am at least twice as strong as you are and I have nothing to fear besides. For you could not complain afterwards. You surely would not be willing actually to betray your brother? Besides, no one would believe you. How should a girl have come alone to visit a solitary man in his lodgings? So that even if you do sacrifice your brother, you could prove nothing. It is very difficult to prove an assault, Avdotya Romanovna." "Scoundrel!" whispered Dounia indignantly. "As you like, but observe I was only speaking by way of a general proposition. It's my personal conviction that you are perfectly right, violence is hateful. I only spoke to show you that you need have no remorse, even if you were willing to save your brother of your own accord, as I suggest to you. You would be simply submitting to circumstances, to violence, in fact, if we must use that word. Think about it. Your brother's and your mother's fate are in your hands. I will be your slave all my life. I will wait here." Svidrigaïlov sat down on the sofa about 8 steps from Dounia. She had not the slightest doubt now of his unbending determination. Besides, she knew him. Suddenly she pulled out of her pocket a revolver, cocked it and laid it in her hand on the table. Svidrigaïlov jumped up. "Aha! So that's it, is it?" he cried, surprised but smiling maliciously. "Well, that completely alters the aspect of affairs. You've made things wonderfully easier for me, Avdotya Romanovna. But where did you get the revolver? Was it Mr. Razumihin? Why, it's my revolver, an old friend, and how I've hunted for it! The shooting lessons I've given you in the country have not been thrown away." "It's not your revolver, it belonged to Marfa Petrovna, whom you killed, wretch! There was nothing of yours in her house. I took it when I began to suspect what you were capable of. If you dare to advance one step, I swear I'll kill you." She was frantic. "But your brother?" "I ask from curiosity," said Svidrigaïlov, still standing where he was. "Inform if you want to. Don't stir, don't come nearer, I'll shoot. You poisoned your wife, I know. You are a murderer yourself." She held the revolver ready. "Are you so positive I poisoned Marfa Petrovna?" "You did! You hinted it yourself. You talked to me of poison. I know you went to get it, you had it in readiness, it was your doing. It must have been your doing, scoundrel!" "Even if that were true, it would have been for your sake. You would have been the cause." "You are lying! I hated you always, always." "Oho, Avdotya Romanovna! You seem to have forgotten how you softened to me in the heat of propaganda. I saw it in your eyes. Do you remember that moonlight night when the nightingale was singing?" "That's a lie!" There was a flash of fury in Dounia's eyes. "That's a lie and a libel." "A lie? Well, if you like, it's a lie. I made it up. Women ought not to be reminded of such things," he smiled. "I know you will shoot, you pretty wild creature. Well, shoot away!" Dounia raised the revolver and, deadly pale, gazed at him, measuring the distance and awaiting the first movement on his part. Her lower lip was white and quivering, and her big black eyes flashed like fire. He had never seen her so handsome. The fire glowing in her eyes at the moment she raised the revolver seemed to kindle him, and there was a pang of anguish in his heart. He took a step forward and a shot rang out. The bullet grazed his hair and flew into the wall behind. He stood still and laughed softly. "The wasp has stung me. She aimed straight at my head. What's this? Blood?" He pulled out his handkerchief to wipe the blood, which flowed in a thin stream down his right temple. The bullet seemed to have just grazed the skin. Dounia lowered the revolver and looked at Svidrigaïlov not so much in terror as in a sort of wild amazement. She seemed not to understand what she was doing and what was going on. "Well, you missed! Fire again, I'll wait," said Svidrigaïlov softly, still smiling, but gloomily. "If you go on like that, I shall have time to seize you before you cock again." Dounia started, quickly cocked the pistol and again raised it. "Let me be!" she cried in despair. "I swear I'll shoot again. I'll kill you!" "Well, at 3 paces you can hardly help it. But if you don't, then..." His eyes flashed and he took 2 steps forward. Dounia shot again. It missed fire. "You haven't loaded it properly. Never mind, you have another charge there. Get it ready. I'll wait." He stood facing her 2 paces away, waiting and gazing at her with wild determination, with feverishly passionate, stubborn, set eyes. Dounia saw that he would sooner die than let her go. And now, of course, she would kill him at 2 paces. Suddenly she flung away the revolver. "She's dropped it," said Svidrigaïlov with surprise, and he drew a deep breath. A weight seemed to have rolled from his heart. Perhaps not only the fear of death indeed, he may scarcely have felt it at that moment. It was the deliverance from another feeling, darker and more bitter, which he could not himself have defined. He went to Dounia and gently put his arm round her waist. She did not resist, but trembling like a leaf, looked at him with suppliant eyes. He tried to say something, but his lips moved without being able to utter a sound. "Let me go," Dounia implored. Svidrigaïlov shuddered. Her voice now was quite different. "Then you don't love me?" he asked softly. Dounia shook her head. "And... and you can't? Never?" he whispered in despair. "Never." There followed a moment of terrible dumb struggle in the heart of Svidrigaïlov. He looked at her with an indescribable gaze. Suddenly he withdrew his arm, turned quickly to the window and stood facing it. Another moment passed. "Here's the key." He took it out of the left pocket of his coat and laid it on the table behind him, without turning or looking at Dounia. "Take it. Make haste." He looked stubbornly out of the window. Dounia went up to the table to take the key. Make haste," repeated Svidrigaïlov, still without turning or moving. But there seemed a terrible significance in the tone of that "make haste." Dounia understood it, snatched up the key, flew to the door, unlocked it quickly and rushed out of the room. A minute later, beside herself, she ran out on to the canal bank in the direction of X bridge. Svidrigaïlov remained 3 minutes standing at the window. At last he slowly turned, looked about him and passed his hand over his forehead. A strange smile contorted his face, a pitiful, sad, weak smile, a smile of despair. The blood, which was already getting dry, smeared his hand. He looked angrily at it, then wetted a towel and washed his temple. The revolver which Dounia had flung away lay near the door and suddenly caught his eye. He picked it up and examined it. It was a little pocket 3-barrel revolver of old‐fashioned construction. There were still 2 charges and 1 capsule left in it. It could be fired again. He thought a little, put the revolver in his pocket, took his hat and went out. End of Part 6, Chapter 5. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine. Part 6, Chapter 6. Of Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Translated by Constance Garnett. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine. Part 6, Chapter 6. He spent that evening till 10 o'clock going from one low haunt to another. Katya too turned up and sang another gutter song, how a certain villain and tyrant began kissing Katya. Svidrigaïlov treated Katya and the organ grinder and some singers and the waiters and 2 little clerks. He was particularly drawn to these clerks by the fact that they both had crooked noses, one bent to the left and the other to the right. They took him finally to a pleasure garden where he paid for their entrance. There was one lanky 3-year-old pine tree and 3 bushes in the garden, besides a Vauxhall which was in reality a drinking bar, where tea too was served, and there were a few green tables and chairs standing round it. A chorus of wretched singers and a drunken but exceedingly depressed German clown from Munich with a red nose entertained the public. The clerks quarrelled with some other clerks, and a fight seemed imminent. Svidrigaïlov was chosen to decide the dispute. He listened to them for a quarter of an hour, but they shouted so loud that there was no possibility of understanding them. The only fact that seemed certain was that one of them had stolen something, and had even succeeded in selling it on the spot to a Jew, but would not share the spoil with his companion. Finally, it appeared that the stolen object was a teaspoon belonging to the Vauxhall. It was missed, and the affair began to seem troublesome. Svidrigaïlov paid for the spoon, got up and walked out of the garden. It was about 6 o'clock. He had not drunk a drop of wine all this time, and had ordered tea more for the sake of appearances than anything. It was a dark and stifling evening. Threatening storm clouds came over the sky about 10 o'clock. There was a clap of thunder, and the rain came down like a waterfall. The water fell not in drops, but beat on the earth in streams. There were flashes of lightning every minute, and each flash lasted while one could count 5. Drenched to the skin, he went home, locked himself in, opened the bureau, took out all his money and tore up 2 or 3 papers. Then, putting the money in his pocket, he was about to change his clothes, but looking out of the window and listening to the thunder and the rain, he gave up the idea, took up his hat and went out of the room without locking the door. He went straight to Sonia. She was at home. She was not alone. The 4 Kapernaumov children were with her. She was giving them tea. She received Svidrigaïlov in respectful silence, looking wonderingly at his soaking clothes. The children all ran away at once in indescribable terror. Svidrigaïlov sat down at the table and asked Sonia to sit beside him. She timidly prepared to listen. "I may be going to America," Sofya Semyonovna said Svidrigaïlov, "and as I am probably seeing you for the last time, I have come to make some arrangements. Well, did you see the lady to day? I know what she said to you, you need not tell me." Sonia made a movement and blushed. "Those people have their own way of doing things. As to your sisters and your brother, they are really provided for, and the money assigned to them I've put into safe keeping and have received acknowledgments. You had better take charge of the receipts, in case anything happens. Here, take them. Well now, that's settled. Here are 3 5% bonds to the value of 3,000 roubles. Take those for yourself, entirely for yourself, and let that be strictly between ourselves, so that no one knows of it, whatever you hear. You will need the money, for to go on living in the old way, Sofya Semyonovna, is bad. And besides, there is no need for it now." "I am so much indebted to you, and so are the children and my stepmother," said Sonia hurriedly, "and if I've said so little, please don't consider..." "That's enough, that's enough! But as for the money, Arkady Ivanovitch, I am very grateful to you, but I don't need it now. I can always earn my own living. Don't think me ungrateful. If you are so charitable, that money... It's for you, Sofya Semyonovna, and please don't waste words over it. I haven't time for it. You will want it. Rodion Romanovitch has 2 alternatives: a bullet in the brain or Siberia." Sonia looked wildly at him and started. "Don't be uneasy. I know all about it from himself, and I am not a gossip. I won't tell anyone. It was good advice when you told him to give himself up and confess. It would be so much better for him. Well, if it turns out to be Siberia, he will go, and you will follow him. That's so, isn't it? And if so, you'll need money. You'll need it for him. Do you understand? Giving it to you is the same as my giving it to him. Besides, you promised Amalia Ivanovna to pay what's owing. I heard you. How can you undertake such obligations so heedlessly, Sofya Semyonovna? It was Katerina Ivanovna's debt and not yours, so you ought not to have taken any notice of the German woman. You can't get through the world like that. If you are ever questioned about me, tomorrow or the day after, you will be asked. Don't say anything about my coming to see you now, and don't show the money to anyone or say a word about it. Well now, good‐bye." He got up. "My greetings to Rodion Romanovitch. By the way, you'd better put the money for the present in Mr. Razumihin's keeping. You know Mr. Razumihin? Of course you do. He's not a bad fellow. Take it to him tomorrow, or... when the time comes. And till then hide it carefully." Sonia, too, jumped up from her chair and looked in dismay at Svidrigaïlov. She longed to speak, to ask a question, but for the first moment she did not dare and did not know how to begin. "How can you be going now in such rain?" "Why, be starting for America and be stopped by rain? Ha! Good‐bye, Sofya Semyonovna, my dear. Live and live long. You will be of use to others. By the way, tell Mr. Razumihin I send my greetings to him. Tell him Arkady Ivanovitch Svidrigaïlov sends his greetings. Be sure to." He went out, leaving Sonia in a state of wondering anxiety and vague apprehension. It appeared afterwards that on the same evening, at 11:20, he made another very eccentric and unexpected visit. The rain still persisted. Drenched to the skin, he walked into the little flat where the parents of his betrothed lived, in Third Street in Vassilyevsky Island. He knocked some time before he was admitted, and his visit at first caused great perturbation. But Svidrigaïlov could be very fascinating when he liked, so that the first and indeed very intelligent surmise of the sensible parents, that Svidrigaïlov had probably had so much to drink that he did not know what he was doing, vanished immediately. The decrepit father was wheeled in to see Svidrigaïlov by the tender and sensible mother, who as usual began the conversation with various irrelevant questions. She never asked a direct question, but began by smiling and rubbing her hands, and then, if she were obliged to ascertain something, for instance when Svidrigaïlov would like to have the wedding, she would begin by interested and almost eager questions about Paris and the court life there, and only by degrees brought the conversation round to Third Street. On other occasions this had of course been very impressive, but this time Arkady Ivanovitch seemed particularly impatient, and insisted on seeing his betrothed at once, though he had been informed to begin with that she had already gone to bed. The girl, of course, appeared. Svidrigaïlov informed her at once that he was obliged by very important affairs to leave Petersburg for a time, and therefore brought her 15,000 roubles and begged her accept them as a present from him, as he had long been intending to make her this trifling present before their wedding. The logical connection of the present with his immediate departure and the absolute necessity of visiting them for that purpose in pouring rain at midnight was not made clear. But it all went off very well. Even the inevitable ejaculations of wonder and regret, the inevitable questions were extraordinarily few and restrained. On the other hand, the gratitude expressed was most glowing and was reinforced by tears from the most sensible of mothers. Svidrigaïlov got up, laughed, kissed his betrothed, patted her cheek, declared he would soon come back, and noticing in her eyes, together with childish curiosity, a sort of earnest dumb inquiry, reflected and kissed her again, though he felt sincere anger inwardly at the thought that his present would be immediately locked up in the keeping of the most sensible of mothers. He went away, leaving them all in a state of extraordinary excitement. But the tender mamma, speaking quietly in a half‐whisper, settled some of the most important of their doubts, concluding that Svidrigaïlov was a great man, a man of great affairs and connections, and of great wealth. There was no knowing what he had in his mind. He would start off on a journey and give away money just as the fancy took him, so that there was nothing surprising about that. Of course it was strange that he was wet through, but Englishmen, for instance, are even more eccentric, and all these people of high society didn't think of what was said of them and didn't stand on ceremony. Possibly, indeed, he came like that on purpose to show that he was not afraid of anyone. Above all, not a word should be said about it, for God knows what might come of it, and the money must be locked up, and it was most fortunate that Fedosya, the cook, had not left the kitchen. And above all, not a word must be said to that old cat, Madame Resslich, and so on and so on. They sat up whispering till 2 o'clock, but the girl went to bed much earlier, amazed and rather sorrowful. Svidrigaïlov meanwhile, exactly at midnight, crossed the bridge on the way back to the mainland. The rain had ceased and there was a roaring wind. He began shivering, and for one moment he gazed at the black waters of the little Neva with a look of special interest, even inquiry. But he soon felt it very cold, standing by the water. He turned and went towards Y. Prospect. He walked along that endless street for a long time, almost half an hour. more than once stumbling in the dark on the wooden pavement, but continually looking for something on the right side of the street. He had noticed passing through this street lately that there was a hotel somewhere towards the end, built of wood, but fairly large, and its name, he remembered, was something like Adrianople. He was not mistaken. The hotel was so conspicuous in that God-forsaken place that he could not fail to see it even in the dark. It was a long, blackened, wooden building, and in spite of the late hour there were lights in the windows and signs of life within. He went in and asked a ragged fellow who met him in the corridor for a room. The latter, scanning Svidrigaïlov, pulled himself together and led him at once to a close and tiny room in the distance, at the end of the corridor, under the stairs. There was no other, all were occupied. The ragged fellow looked inquiringly. "Is there tea?" asked Svidrigaïlov. "Yes, sir." "What else is there?" "Veal, vodka, savouries." "Bring me tea and veal." "And you want nothing else?" he asked with apparent surprise. "Nothing, nothing." The ragged man went away, completely disillusioned. "It must be a nice place," thought Svidrigaïlov. "How was it I didn't know it? I expect I look as if I came from a café chantant and have had some adventure on the way. It would be interesting to know who stayed here." He lighted the candle and looked at the room more carefully. It was a room so low pitched that Svidrigaïlov could only just stand up in it. It had one window, the bed which was very dirty, and the plain stained chair and table almost filled it up. The walls looked as though they were made of planks, covered with shabby paper, so torn and dusty that the pattern was indistinguishable, though the general colour, yellow, could still be made out. One of the walls was cut short by the sloping ceiling, though the room was not an attic but just under the stairs. Svidrigaïlov set down the candle, sat down on the bed and sank into thought. But a strange, persistent murmur, which sometimes rose to a shout in the next room, attracted his attention. The murmur had not ceased from the moment he entered the room. He listened. Someone was upbraiding and almost tearfully scolding, but he heard only one voice. Svidrigaïlov got up, shaded the light with his hand, and at once he saw light through a crack in the wall. He went up and peeped through. The room, which was somewhat larger than his, had two occupants. One of them, a very curly‐headed man with a red inflamed face, was standing in the pose of an orator without his coat, with his legs wide apart to preserve his balance, and smiting himself on the breast. He reproached the other with being a beggar, with having no standing whatever. He declared that he had taken the other out of the gutter, and he could turn him out when he liked, and that only the finger of Providence sees it all. The object of his reproaches was sitting in a chair, and had the air of a man who wants dreadfully to sneeze, but can't. He sometimes turned sheepish and befogged eyes on the speaker, but obviously had not the slightest idea what he was talking about, and scarcely heard it. A candle was burning down on the table, there were wine glasses, a nearly empty bottle of vodka, bread and cucumber, and glasses with the dregs of stale tea. After gazing attentively at this, Svidrigaïlov turned away indifferently and sat down on the bed. The ragged attendant, returning with the tea, could not resist asking him again whether he didn't want anything more, and again receiving a negative reply, finally withdrew. Svidrigaïlov made haste to drink a glass of tea to warm himself, but could not eat anything. He began to feel feverish. He took off his coat and, wrapping himself in the blanket, lay down on the bed. He was annoyed. It would have been better to be well for the occasion, he thought with a smile. The room was close, the candle burnt dimly, the wind was roaring outside. He heard a mouse scratching in the corner, and the room smelt of mice and of leather. He lay in a sort of reverie. One thought followed another. He felt a longing to fix his imagination on something. "It must be a garden under the window," he thought. "There's a sound of trees. How I dislike the sound of trees on a stormy night in the dark. They give one a horrid feeling." He remembered how he had disliked it when he passed Petrovsky Park just now. This reminded him of the bridge over the Little Neva, and he felt cold again as he had when standing there. "I never have liked water," he thought, "even in a landscape," and he suddenly smiled again at a strange idea. "Surely now all these questions of taste and comfort ought not to matter. But I've become more particular, like an animal that picks out a special place for such an occasion. I ought to have gone into the Petrovsky Park. I suppose it seemed dark, cold. Ha! As though I were seeking pleasant sensations! By the way, why haven't I put out the candle?" He blew it out. "They've gone to bed next door," he thought, not seeing the light at the crack. "Well now, Marfa Petrovna, now is the time for you to turn up. It's dark and the very time and place for you. But now you won't come." He suddenly recalled how, an hour before carrying out his design on Dounia, he had recommended Raskolnikov to trust her to Razumihin's keeping. "I suppose I really did say it, as Raskolnikov guessed, to tease myself. But what a rogue that Raskolnikov is! He's gone through a good deal. He may be a successful rogue in time when he's got over his nonsense. But now he's too eager for life. These young men are contemptible on that point. But hang the fellow! Let him please himself, it's nothing to do with me." He could not get to sleep. By degrees Dounia's image rose before him and a shudder ran over him. "No, I must give up all that now," he thought, rousing himself. "I must think of something else. It's queer and funny. I never had a great hatred for anyone. I never particularly desired to avenge myself even, and that's a bad sign, a bad sign, a bad sign. I never liked quarrelling either and never lost my temper. That's a bad sign too. And the promises I made her just now, too! Damnation! But who knows, perhaps she would have made a new man of me somehow." He ground his teeth and sank into silence again. Again Dounia's image rose before him, just as she was when, after shooting the first time, she had lowered the revolver in terror and gazed blankly at him, so that he might have seized her twice over and she would not have lifted a hand to defend herself if he had not reminded her. He recalled how at that instant he felt almost sorry for her, how he had felt a pang at his heart. "Aïe, damnation, these thoughts again! I must put it away." He was dozing off. The feverish shiver had ceased, when suddenly something seemed to run over his arm and leg under the bedclothes. He started. "Ugh, hang it! I believe it's a mouse," he thought. "That's the veal I left on the table." He felt fearfully disinclined to pull off the blanket, get up, get cold, but all at once something unpleasant ran over his leg again. He pulled off the blanket and lighted the candle. Shaking with feverish chill, he bent down to examine the bed. There was nothing. He shook the blanket, and suddenly a mouse jumped out on the sheet. He tried to catch it, but the mouse ran to and fro in zigzags without leaving the bed, slipped between his fingers, ran over his hand and suddenly darted under the pillow. He threw down the pillow, but in one instant felt something leap on his chest and dart over his body and down his back under his shirt. He trembled nervously and woke up. The room was dark. He was lying on the bed and wrapped up in the blanket as before. The wind was howling under the window. "How disgusting," he thought with annoyance. He got up and sat on the edge of the bedstead with his back to the window. "It's better not to sleep at all," he decided. There was a cold damp draught from the window, however. Without getting up he drew the blanket over him and wrapped himself in it. He was not thinking of anything and did not want to think. But one image rose after another, incoherent scraps of thought, without beginning or end, passed through his mind. He sank into drowsiness. Perhaps the cold, or the dampness, or the dark, or the wind that howled under the window and tossed the trees, roused a sort of persistent craving for the fantastic. He kept dwelling on images of flowers; he fancied a charming flower garden, a bright, warm, almost hot day, a holiday, Trinity Day. A fine sumptuous country cottage in the English taste, overgrown with fragrant flowers, with flower beds going round the house. The porch, wreathed in climbers, was surrounded with beds of roses. A light, cool staircase, carpeted with rich rugs, was decorated with rare plants in china pots. He noticed particularly in the windows nosegays of tender, white, heavily fragrant narcissus bending over their bright green, thick long stalks. He was reluctant to move away from them, but he went up the stairs and came into a large high drawing room, and again, everywhere, at the windows, the doors on to the balcony, and on the balcony itself were flowers. The floors were strewn with freshly cut fragrant hay, the windows were open, a fresh, cool, light air came into the room. The birds were chirruping under the window, and in the middle of the room, on a table covered with a white satin shroud, stood a coffin. The coffin was covered with white silk and edged with a thick white frill. Wreaths of flowers surrounded it on all sides. Among the flowers lay a girl in a white muslin dress, with her arms crossed and pressed on her bosom as though carved out of marble. But her loose fair hair was wet; there was a wreath of roses on her head. The stern and already rigid profile of her face looked as though chiselled of marble too, and the smile on her pale lips was full of an immense unchildish misery and sorrowful appeal. Svidrigaïlov knew that girl. There was no holy image, no burning candle beside the coffin, no sound of prayers. The girl had drowned herself; she was only 14, but her heart was broken. And she had destroyed herself, crushed by an insult that had appalled and amazed that childish soul, had smirched that angel purity with unmerited disgrace, and torn from her a last scream of despair, unheeded and brutally disregarded, on a dark night in the cold and wet, while the wind howled. Svidrigaïlov came to himself, got up from the bed and went to the window. He felt for the latch and opened it. The wind lashed furiously into the little room and stung his face and his chest, only covered with his shirt as though with frost. Under the window there must have been something like a garden, and apparently a pleasure garden. There, too, probably, there were tea tables and singing in the daytime. Now drops of rain flew in at the window from the trees and bushes. It was dark as in a cellar, so that he could only just make out some dark blurs of objects. Svidrigaïlov, bending down with elbows on the window sill, gazed for 5 minutes into the darkness. The boom of a cannon, followed by a second one, resounded in the darkness of the night. "Ah, the signal! The river is overflowing," he thought. "By morning it will be swirling down the street in the lower parts, flooding the basements and cellars. The cellar rats will swim out, and men will curse in the rain and wind as they drag their rubbish to their upper storeys. What time is it now?" And he had hardly thought it, when somewhere near, a clock on the wall, ticking away hurriedly, struck 3. "Aha! It will be light in an hour. Why wait? I'll go out at once straight to the park. I'll choose a great bush there, drenched with rain, so that as soon as one's shoulder touches it, millions of drops drip on one's head." He moved away from the window, shut it, lighted the candle, put on his waistcoat, his overcoat and his hat and went out, carrying the candle, into the passage to look for the ragged attendant who would be asleep somewhere in the midst of candle ends and all sorts of rubbish, to pay him for the room and leave the hotel. "It's the best minute. I couldn't choose a better." He walked for some time through a long narrow corridor without finding anyone, and was just going to call out, when suddenly in a dark corner between an old cupboard and the door, he caught sight of a strange object which seemed to be alive. He bent down with the candle and saw a little girl not more than 5 years old, shivering and crying, with her clothes as wet as a soaking house flannel. She did not seem afraid of Svidrigaïlov, but looked at him with blank amazement out of her big black eyes. Now and then she sobbed, as children do when they have been crying a long time, but are beginning to be comforted. The child's face was pale and tired, she was numb with cold. "How can she have come here? She must have hidden here and not slept all night." He began questioning her. The child, suddenly becoming animated, chattered away in her baby language, something about Mammy, and that Mammy would beat her, and about some cup that she had broken. The child chattered on without stopping. He could only guess from what she said that she was a neglected child, whose mother, probably a drunken cook in the service of the hotel, whipped and frightened her, that the child had broken a cup of her mother's and was so frightened that she had run away the evening before, and hidden for a long while somewhere outside in the rain, at last had made her way in here, hidden behind the cupboard and spent the night there, crying and trembling from the damp, the darkness, and the fear that she would be badly beaten for it. He took her in his arms, went back to his room, sat her on the bed and began undressing her. The torn shoes which she had on her stockingless feet were as wet as if they had been standing in a puddle all night. When he had undressed her, he put her on the bed, covered her up and wrapped her in the blanket from her head downwards. She fell asleep at once. Then he sank into dreary musing again. "What folly to trouble myself," he decided suddenly with an oppressive feeling of annoyance. "What idiocy!" In vexation he took up the candle to go and look for the ragged attendant again and make haste to go away.
"Damn the child," he thought as he opened the door, but he turned again to see whether the child was asleep. He raised the blanket carefully. The child was sleeping soundly; she had got warm under the blanket, and her pale cheeks were flushed. But strange to say, that flush seemed brighter and coarser than the rosy cheeks of childhood. "It's a flush of fever," thought Svidrigaïlov. It was like the flush from drinking, as though she had been given a full glass to drink. Her crimson lips were hot and glowing. But what was this? He suddenly fancied that her long black eyelashes were quivering, as though the lids were opening and a sly crafty eye peeped out with an unchildlike wink, as though the little girl were not asleep but pretending. Yes, it was so. Her lips parted in a smile. The corners of her mouth quivered, as though she were trying to control them. But now she quite gave up all effort, now it was a grin, a broad grin. There was something shameless, provocative in that quite unchildish face. It was depravity, it was the face of a harlot, the shameless face of a French harlot. Now both eyes opened wide, they turned a glowing, shameless glance upon him. They laughed, invited him. There was something infinitely hideous and shocking in that laugh, in those eyes, in such nastiness in the face of a child. "What? At 5 years old?" Svidrigaïlov muttered in genuine horror. "What does it mean?" And now she turned to him, her little face all aglow, holding out her arms. "Accursed child!" Svidrigaïlov cried, raising his hand to strike her. But at that moment he woke up. He was in the same bed, still wrapped in the blanket. The candle had not been lighted, and daylight was streaming in at the windows. "I've had nightmare all night." He got up angrily, feeling utterly shattered. His bones ached. There was a thick mist outside and he could see nothing. It was nearly 5. He had overslept himself. He got up, put on his still damp jacket and overcoat. Feeling the revolver in his pocket, he took it out, and then he sat down, took a notebook out of his pocket, and in the most conspicuous place on the title page wrote a few lines in large letters. Reading them over, he sank into thought with his elbows on the table. The revolver and the notebook lay beside him. Some flies woke up and settled on the untouched veal, which was still on the table. He stared at them and at last with his free right hand began trying to catch one. He tried till he was tired, but could not catch it. At last, realising that he was engaged in this interesting pursuit, he started, got up and walked resolutely out of the room. A minute later he was in the street. A thick milky mist hung over the town. Svidrigaïlov walked along the slippery, dirty wooden pavement towards the Little Neva. He was picturing the waters of the Little Neva swollen in the night, Petrovsky Island, the wet paths, the wet grass, the wet trees and bushes, and at last the bush. He began ill-humouredly staring at the houses, trying to think of something else. There was not a cabman or a passer-by in the street. The bright yellow, wooden little houses looked dirty and dejected with their closed shutters. The cold and damp penetrated his whole body and he began to shiver. From time to time he came across shop signs and read each carefully. At last he reached the end of the wooden pavement and came to a big stone house. A dirty, shivering dog crossed his path with its tail between its legs. A man in a greatcoat lay face downwards, dead drunk, across the pavement. He looked at him and went on. A high tower stood up on the left. "Bah!" he shouted. "Here is a place! Why should it be Petrovsky? It will be in the presence of an official witness anyway." He almost smiled at this new thought and turned into the street where there was the big house with the tower. At the great closed gates of the house a little man stood with his shoulder leaning against them, wrapped in a grey soldier's coat, with a copper Achilles helmet on his head. He cast a drowsy and indifferent glance at Svidrigaïlov. His face wore that perpetual look of peevish dejection which is so sourly printed on all faces of Jewish race without exception. They both, Svidrigaïlov and Achilles, stared at each other for a few minutes without speaking. At last it struck Achilles as irregular for a man not drunk to be standing 3 steps from him, staring and not saying a word. "What do you want here?" he said, without moving or changing his position. "Nothing, brother. Good morning," answered Svidrigaïlov. "This isn't the place." "I am going to foreign parts, brother." "To foreign parts?" "To America." "America? Svidrigaïlov took out the revolver and cocked it. Achilles raised his eyebrows. "I say, this is not the place for such jokes." "Why shouldn't it be the place?" "Because it isn't." "Well, brother, I don't mind that. It's a good place. When you are asked, you can just say he was going, he said, to America." He put the revolver to his right temple. "You can't do it here, it's not the place," cried Achilles, rousing himself, his eyes growing bigger and bigger. Svidrigaïlov pulled the trigger. End of Part 6, Chapter 6. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine.